Hey, welcome back to another episode of the YouSchool podcast. I am your fearless guide, Scott Schimmel. And what we tend to talk about are issues relating to raising kids to be healthy and thriving. And a key part of that, I know what I want. It's probably pretty similar to what you want. I want my kids to become happy and successful. And those things aren't automatic. Actually, I think the norm, and the reason we started YouSchool, the norm is that if you're listening, your kids are probably on the path to college or university, and the norm would be that they would graduate, find a career, and yet kind of float along. About 12 years ago, did a personal research study, tracked down 400 college graduates to kind of understand what is life like for them after college. And all but three, that's not exaggerating, all but three said the same story. Thank you for checking in on me. No one really asked me how I'm actually doing. And in fact, I'm not doing well. And then they would say two things that really stuck out. Number one, I feel really lonely and disconnected. And two, I feel like I'm on a career path and trajectory that is not right for me. And then the kind of punchline was, and I don't know what to do about it. That's why we started YouSchool. We imagine a world where that doesn't happen. And here I am now, 12 years later, raising kids of my own, 18, 15, and 11. And I'm going through it, trying to figure out how do I come alongside my kids, guide them so that they get to clarity about their interests, their values, their priorities, all the stuff that you're working on. And I've also, alongside real parenting and working with thousands of students, have been doing some deep research on adolescent development, particularly identity formation. My oldest son has said for a couple of years, when people have asked, as he gets closer to college, what are you going to major in? What's your kind of career path? He's said things like finance or business, and kind of caught me by surprise. If you know anything about my story, that was my plan. And then I turned left, let's say. And as he said that, I haven't really responded much. It's like, oh, okay, cool. And we've had a couple of conversations where he's asked me, tell me more about that. What does finance actually mean? What do people in finance do? And we've even done a couple things where I had conversations with him and good friends of mine who are in finance, different parts of finance, corporate finance, personal finance. And essentially, you call them informational interviews, where my son gets the chance to talk to these guys, friends of mine, people that he's known most of his life, and ask them about what do they do every day, and then listen to their advice. It's been really helpful, and I think particularly helpful for him to say, I don't want to do that. And narrowing things down is actually a really, really helpful way to get to clarity. And we'll do a whole episode on that. But recently, his answer has changed. And for a while, the answer was, I don't know. And he and I have had conversations around how I don't know isn't necessarily a productive answer. It might be the real answer, but even for the sake of conversation, there's probably better ways to go about it. Because the other person's like, okay, I don't know what to do. So what I advise them to do is say, hey, next time someone asks you, consider saying something like, I'm not sure yet, but I've narrowed down a few things I don't want to do, most notably finance. And he's like, okay, I got that. But then that sent us also in a conversation of looking for clues. And that's what we're going to get into in this episode. There is a lot of pressure for a kid to pick a path. Pressure from parents. There's literally systemic pressure. If they apply to a college, some schools require you to apply to a specific path upon, senior year. Others, you can come in undeclared, but typically by mid-sophomore year, you need to pick something. You need to select a major. So there's pressure to do it, and that's what we're going to zero in on, because there is good pressure and unhelpful pressure. And I'll try to cite other episodes where we talked about that particularly. What I want for my kids, and I think what you want for yours, or for your kids to have a real strong sense that what they're pursuing comes from a deep place. And that deep place can have a variety of flavors and aromas. But one of those is searching for clues about their interests. Now, I obviously know my son, talk to him all the time, but I overlooked a clue, a major clue that was right in front of my face. And that's my hunch for a lot of parents and educators who work with kids. We miss the clues that are right there. And what are they? I think the clues are there. This is going to sound weird, but in their search history. Let me explain. That can get weird. Careful what you look for. But in their search history, particularly, I would say around things like YouTube, maybe a little Instagram, maybe a little TikTok, but I would try to start with YouTube and or podcasts if they're listening to podcasts. What are the things that express their interests or their curiosity? Because your interest and curiosity, and there's great research for this, is a fantastic foundation to move from, to build upon. Your interest and curiosity is a glimpse of a clue that you're wired for that thing. Because if you've got interest and curiosity, it tends to mean that you've got some like intrinsic motivation there. You're drawn to it, not because of external pressure, not because if I get this, then they will think I'm impressive, not because, my parents said that's where all the jobs are and the money is, not because it will look impressive to a significant other, but because there's something wired towards that thing. My son has been, and we've talked about it hundreds of times, highly interested in things related to history, politics, political science, how economies work, countries work together. I've talked to him about that hundreds of times, and it never occurred to me, the president and chief guide of the school, who has dedicated his entire professional life to guiding young people towards clarity, I did not notice and connect the dots that might be a sign of something. Oops. So here's what this episode is about. I want you to think like the algorithm of YouTube. When I listen to a podcast and you search for a YouTube video, the algorithm is now predisposed to say, let's give them more of that, because they want your time and attention. And there's some nefarious parts of that too that I'm very well aware of. But in this case, the neutral things, he seems to be interested in fixing bikes, seems to be interested in the physics of a wave. And then alongside that, for my son particularly, seems to be very interested in history, politics, political science, geopolitics, economies, and how they work together. Oh, let's give them more of that. So if you like this, you might like that. Next suggested video. That's how I think we need to think as parents as well, just like the algorithm. And in fact, I think the algorithm's actually smarter about our kids than we are, or they are about themselves. And that's a part of the phases of interest discovery. Because the first phase of interest discovery is that you don't even notice that it's there. Because when you're curious about something, when you're interested in something, you're drawn to it. It's not a thing. There's no friction. There's no have to. There's no, I got to get around to that. There's no, somebody else is expecting this from me. And so what I want to encourage you to do is think like the algorithm. Look for clues. It's easy to mistake what they're doing online as just distraction from their actual work, like their homework. It's easy to think they're just wasting time. But what if there's clues right in front of us that we're missing? Let's not miss those. I want to encourage you to look at your own interests, and perhaps if you got a little friction with your kid and they're wary of anything that smells like a lecture coming, don't start with direct questions. Let me see your search history. Don't start with, so what are you interested in these days? That's lame. That's annoying. That's probably not going to go very far. But what you can do, perhaps, is to pay attention to the clues of your own interests, your own curiosity, and maybe just tell a story, and maybe invite them into something that you're deeply interested in. I know I've done that with my son. I'm probably can't see, but I've got like way too many putters and golf. I've indoctrinated my son into my curiosity since he was born. My son knows more about loft and lie angles of custom putters than probably most boys his age. Why? Because I'm deeply curious about it. It's not work to me. It's just play and fun and curiosity. And I've invited him into that as well. So what's the thing for you that you can share? And then that, as you share that, might be a mirror back to him or to her to say, hey, what are you interested in? And what does that point towards? I don't know exactly what it points to for my son. It might fit in the realm of just hobby. It might fit in the realm of just something I'm interested in. Like, I read history. I love politics. It's not something I want to do with my career. Or it might be a hint that we're onto something. So don't overlook it. Think like the algorithm. Pay attention to those things that your kid is drawn to. Highlight it, promote it, encourage it, and get behind it. And then we'll see what happens as we move our kids and march them towards clarity. We'll be back soon. No promises. Soon with another episode of the YouSchool podcast, all for the sake of kids.